A text message notification is a tiny, insignificant sound. But for Genevieve Sterling, it was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping on her 14-year marriage. It wasn't a confession or a tearful apology that came through her phone. It was a photo. A sun-drenched, professionally lit photograph of her husband, the tech magnate Damien Sterling, laughing on the deck of a yacht in St. Bart's. His arm was wrapped tightly around a woman who was decidedly not her. And the message from an unknown number contained only 5 words that set the world on fire. He says you hate the sun. In that moment, Genevieve didn't just get angry. She got creative. She wouldn't just leave him. She would dismantle his entire world, starting with the one thing he loved more than himself, his legendary car collection. Genevieve Sterling moved through her Greenwich, Connecticut estate like a ghost, haunting her own life. The house, a sprawling Georgian monolith of cold marble and colder glass, was a testament to the success of her husband, Damien. Every surface was polished to a mirror shine, every artwork curated with impeccable taste, her taste a fact Damien often forgot to mention during his interviews with architectural magazines. For 14 years, she had been the silent partner in the Sterling empire, the graceful hostess, the impeccably dressed accessory, the steady hand that organized their life into a seamless portrait of unimaginable wealth and power. Damien was a titan of the fintech world, a man who saw life as a series of algorithms and acquisitions. He was brilliant, ruthless, and possessed a charisma that could charm regulators and investors with equal ease. He loved Genevieve, he claimed, in the same way he loved the 18th century grandfather clock in the foyer, a beautiful, reliable fixture that demonstrated his good taste and appreciation for classics. But passion had long since been replaced by a comfortable, almost sterile routine. Their conversations were about schedules, charity galas, and portfolio performance. The fire that had once defined them, a whirlwind romance between a driven tech prodigy and a sharp-witted art history graduate, had dwindled to a pilot light barely flickering in the vast emptiness of their home. Genevieve had poured her own ambitions into his. She'd used her eye for aesthetics to design the user interfaces for his first successful apps, her understanding of history to help him navigate the treacherous, blue-blooded social circles of old money, and her emotional intelligence to smooth over the ruffled feathers of employees he trampled on his way to the top. He had promised her the world, and in a way he had delivered. She had couture gowns, private jets, and a black Amex card with no conceivable limit. What she lacked was a husband. The man she had married, the one who would talk with her for hours about art and philosophy, was gone. In his place was Damien Sterling, a brand, a corporation in a bespoke suit. His true passion, the place where the ghost of the old Damien still resided, was not in their 20,000-square-foot mansion. It was in a separate, far more sacred building, a few miles away, nestled in a private wooded enclave in Scottsdale, Arizona. He called it the Sanctuary. It was a climate-controlled, museum-quality facility that he had built for one purpose, to house his car collection. It wasn't just a garage, it was a cathedral of chrome and steel. Genevieve had been there only a handful of times. It was his space, his holy of holies. Inside were 24 of the rarest, most sought-after automobiles on the planet. A 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, one of only 36 ever made its Rosso Corsa paint, glowing under the gallery lighting. A 1957 Jaguar XKSS, the road-going version of the Le Mans winning D-Type, once owned by a Hollywood icon. A 1998 McLaren F1 LM, a brutal orange hypercar that screamed pure, unadulterated power. A Bugatti Type 57 SC, Atlantic, its riveted spine, a work of sculptural genius. Each car had a story, a provenance that Damien could recite with a level of detail and passion he no longer reserved for his wife. He didn't see them as cars. He saw them as testaments to his own greatness, physical manifestations of his success and discerning taste. He loved them more than anything. He loved them more than her. Genevieve had made a fragile peace with this fact years ago. She was the curator of his home, but the cars were the curator of his soul. The latest trip was supposed to be a solo venture, a digital detox, he'd called it, on a friend's yacht in the Caribbean. He needed to unwind, to disconnect from the pressures of a new AI venture he was launching. He'd kissed her on the cheek, his scent of expensive cologne and ambition lingering in the air. "I'll miss you, Jen," he'd said, his eyes already focused on the tarmac where his Gulf Stream was waiting. She had smiled, played the part of the supportive wife, and told him to have a wonderful time. The first week was marked by the usual silence she'd grown accustomed to. He wasn't one for frequent calls or texts. An email from his assistant confirming his safe arrival, a pre-scheduled delivery of her favorite peonies, these were the automated gestures of their modern marriage. Genevieve spent the time in her own sanctuary, the West Wing Library, poring over auction catalogues for a potential acquisition for the Met. It was a quiet, orderly existence. The text arrived on a Tuesday morning. The sky was a crisp, merciless blue. Her phone chimed on the granite countertop of the kitchen, a space usually filled with the scent of coffee and the quiet hum of the sub-zero refrigerator. It was an unknown number, a +590 country code. St. Bart's. Her heart gave a single painful thump against her ribs. She tapped the screen, and the image loaded. There he was. Damien, her Damien, looking younger and more carefree than he had in a decade. The sun kissed his skin, the turquoise water stretched out behind him, a cliché of paradise. He was laughing a full-throated, genuine laugh she hadn't heard directed at her in years. His arm was slung around the bare, tanned shoulders of a woman with platinum blonde hair and impossibly long legs. The woman was looking directly at the camera, a smirk playing on her perfectly glossed lips. She was Katarina Thorne, a model and influencer, whose social media feed was a vacuous tapestry of luxury brands and exotic locations. Genevieve had seen her in magazines, a vapid but beautiful face of the moment. Her thumb trembled as she scrolled down. There was a second photo. This one was a selfie, Katarina's face filling the frame, Damien kissing her neck in the background, his eyes closed in bliss. The composition was deliberate, cruel. It was a performance. And then she saw the text beneath the images. 5 words. "He says you hate the sun." It was so petty, so childish. It was a reference to a conversation from years ago on their honeymoon in Italy. Genevieve, fair-skinned and prone to burning, had preferred the shade of the lemon groves to baking on the beach. It was an intimate detail, a tiny piece of their shared history, now twisted into a weapon and handed to this stranger to be used against her. The message wasn't just telling her about the affair. It was mocking her, belittling her very essence. The mistress wasn't just sleeping with her husband. She was plundering the archives of their marriage for ammunition. In that instant, the gilded cage shattered. The cold marble of the kitchen seemed to rush up at her. The peonies on the island suddenly looked like funeral wreaths. 14 years of compromise, of silent support, of swallowing her own needs for the sake of his grand vision, it all curdled into a black, acidic rage. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. A strange, glacial calm settled over her. She thought of Damien's smug, satisfied face. She thought of Katarina's triumphant smirk. And then she thought of the sanctuary. She thought of the 1962 Ferrari, the Jaguar, the McLaren, the things he truly loved. An idea cold and brilliant and terrifying began to crystallize in her mind. He wanted to show her what he valued most. Fine. She would show him what it felt like to lose it. The first hour after the text was a blur of motion. Genevieve walked through the cavernous house, her footsteps echoing a frantic rhythm against the polished oak floors. She touched the cold, impersonal sculptures he'd bought at auction, ran a hand over the spines of books in the library that he'd never opened, and stared at the framed photos of them, smiling, always smiling at galas, on holidays, at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Each image was a lie, a carefully constructed piece of public relations for a marriage that had become an empty shell company. The rage was a physical thing, a humming wire of energy that made her skin tingle. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of a screaming match. It was a focused, diamond-hard fury. The betrayal wasn't the deepest cut, it was the insult, the casual, dismissive cruelty of that 5-word text. He says you hate the sun. It was a calculated move by Katerina, a power play designed to demonstrate her intimacy with Damien, to show Genevieve that she was now the keeper of his secrets, his preferences, his private jokes. It was designed to make Genevieve feel like a relic, a dusty antique replaced by a newer, shinier model. She finally stopped in Damien's office. It was a temple to his ego, panelled in dark mahogany and smelling of leather and success. On his desk, next to a holographic stock ticker, was a small, unassuming silver frame. It didn't hold a photo of her. It held a picture of his first major acquisition, a cherry-red 1967 Shelby GT500. It was the car that had started it all. He'd bought it with the first significant payout from his company, long before the billions. It was the only car from his past that remained in the collection, a touchstone to the hungry, ambitious man he used to be. It was also, she knew, the one that held the most sentimental value. It would be the one that hurt the most to lose. Her mind was racing, connecting disparate pieces of information, conversations from years past, legal documents, signed without a second thought. She needed to know if her nascent, audacious plan was even possible. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. Penelope Vance, attorney at law. The voice was brisk, no nonsense. "Penny, it's Genevieve." There was a pause. "Jen, you sound different. Is everything all right?" "No." Genevieve said, her voice eerily steady. "Not at all. I need to see you. Today. And I need you to bring everything you have on the incorporation of Sterling Automotive Holdings." Penelope Penny Vance was the antithesis of the Greenwich socialites Genevieve was forced to endure. Sharp, cynical, with a wardrobe of severe black suits and a mind like a steel trap. Penny was the lawyer Damien had hired early in their marriage to handle their complex asset management and tax sheltering. She and Genevieve had formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by a shared, unspoken understanding of Damien's colossal ego. They met that afternoon in a discreet coffee shop in Stamford, far from the prying eyes of their social circle. Genevieve had already packed a small bag and checked into a suite at a boutique hotel under her maiden name. She couldn't bear to be in that house a moment longer. She slid her phone across the table without a word. Penny picked it up, her professionally neutral expression tightening as she looked at the photos and the text. She scrolled back and forth a few times, her jaw clenching. Finally, she looked up, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fury. The little tramp even geotagged it. St. John Beach. Classy. She pushed the phone back. So the question isn't if you're leaving him. The question is how badly you want to burn him on your way out. "I want to incinerate him," Genevieve said the words, feeling powerful on her tongue. "I want to take what he values most, what he worships, and I want to turn it to ash. The company, his shares." Penny suggested already thinking in terms of legal strategy. Genevieve shook her head. "No. That's just money to him. There's always more money. It's not personal enough. I'm talking about the sanctuary." Penny's eyebrows shot up. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The cars. Genevieve, that's not just his prize possession. That's his identity. You go after those cars and you're not just divorcing the man, you're vivisecting him. Good, Genevieve said. Penny was silent for a long moment, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on the thick file folder she'd brought. It's insane. It's brilliant. But is it possible getting a court to order the liquidation of a collection like that during a divorce proceeding could take years? He'd tie it up in litigation until the sun burns out. I'm not talking about a divorce proceeding, Genevieve clarified. I'm talking about a sale, a private sale, conducted by me. Now, Penny stared at her. Then a slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who's just spotted a weakness in its prey. She opened the folder. Sterling Automotive Holdings, LLC, incorporated in Delaware 10 years ago. It's the legal entity that owns the Scottsdale property and every vehicle within it. A shell company for tax and insurance purposes. She pulled out a document, the original articles of incorporation. She ran her finger down the page. He set it up to shield the assets from his business liabilities, Penny explained. If his tech company ever went bankrupt, his creditors couldn't touch the cars. Standard billionaire paranoia. She stopped on a particular section, her finger tapping the paper. Here. Board of Directors and share allocation. She turned the document around for Genevieve to see. There were 2 names listed. Damien Sterling, holding 49% of the shares, and Genevieve Dubois Sterling, holding 51%. Genevieve stared at her own name. She vaguely remembered signing the papers a decade ago. It had been during a flurry of financial restructuring. Damien had breezed into her study, slid a stack of documents in front of her, and said, "Just sign here, here and here, darling. Penny says it'll save us a fortune in taxes." He'd been so dismissive, so sure of his own authority and her passive compliance that he probably hadn't even read the details himself, relying on Penny's advice. He'd simply seen a way to protect his toys and save money. Why, Genevieve whispered, looking at Penny. My idea, actually, Penny admitted with a grimace of satisfaction. At the time, he was considering taking on a high-risk investor. I argued that by making you the majority shareholder of the holding company, it would create an even stronger firewall against any future personal or business litigation. The asset would technically be controlled by a separate, non-liable individual, his devoted wife. It was the ultimate protection. Penny leaned back, a look of profound respect in her eyes. He was so arrogant, so consumed with protecting his collection from outsiders, he never once considered that the greatest threat might be sleeping in his bed. He handed you a loaded gun, Jen. He just forgot to tell you where the trigger was. Genevieve felt a wave of dizziness, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. It was real. The crazy, impossible idea was real. She had the power. He had given it to her himself in his all-consuming greed and arrogance. The LLC's operating agreement grants the majority shareholder full authority in matters of asset liquidation and disbursement. Penny continued, her voice all business now. You have the legal right to sell the property and everything in it. All of it. The land, the building, every last nut and bolt. You don't need his permission. You don't even need to inform him. The plan began to take shape, no longer a fantasy of revenge, but a concrete, actionable strategy. She wouldn't just sell the cars. That would be too simple. She would sell the entire thing, the whole temple, as a single turnkey acquisition. A holy grail for a true collector. There's one man, Genevieve said, her mind already working, who Damien despises and fears in equal measure. A man who he has been trying to beat at auction for years. Silas Blackwood. Penny's eyes widened. Silas Blackwood was a legend in the collecting world, an intensely private, obscenely wealthy industrialist who rarely appeared in public. He was old money with a collection rumored to dwarf Damien's. He saw Damien as new money, a vulgar tourist in the world of true connoisseurs. Damien craved Blackwood's approval and loathed him for withholding it. Selling the collection to him would be the ultimate, most exquisite humiliation. "Can you find him?" Genevieve asked. Penny's smile returned sharper than ever. "For this, I'd find a ghost if he had a bank account. Pack your bags for Arizona, Jen. It's time to go hunting." The flight to Scottsdale was a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. Genevieve sat in the first-class cabin of a commercial flight, a far cry from the plush leather of the Sterling Gulf Stream, and felt more powerful than she had in years. She was no longer a passenger in her own life. She was in the cockpit, flying headlong into a storm of her own making. The hotel suite in Greenwich was a memory, the life she lived there, a photograph fading in the sun. She was Genevieve Dubois now, her maiden name, a shield and a statement of intent. Penny had worked with astonishing speed. While Genevieve was in the air, Penny was activating a network of contacts that burrowed deep into the secretive world of high-end asset brokers. Reaching Silas Blackwood was like trying to contact a phantom. He had no public email, no social media, and his business dealings were shrouded by layers of corporate entities. But Penny was relentless. She found a retired art dealer in Geneva who had once brokered a private sale of a Monet to Blackwood. An introduction was made, a cryptic message was passed, and a secure communication channel was established. Genevieve landed to a text from Penny. "He's interested. Wants proof of ownership and a preliminary inventory. He thinks it's a hoax." The next morning, Genevieve stood before the sanctuary. The building itself was a work of brutalist architecture, a massive windowless cube of charcoal-grey concrete set against the stark beauty of the Sonoran Desert. It looked less like a garage and more like a fortress. She used her keycard, one Damien had given her years ago in case of emergency, and the heavy steel door hissed open. The air inside was cool and sterile, smelling faintly of wax, leather, and gasoline. The lighting was low cinematic, with spotlights making the cars gleam like jewels in a vault. The silence was profound, reverent. For a moment, she felt a pang of something, not regret, but a kind of sorrow for the man Damien had been, the man who had built this beautiful, lonely place. Then she remembered the smirk on Katerina's face, and the sorrow hardened back into resolve. She walked the length of the main gallery, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. She ran a hand over the perfect sweeping fender of the Bugatti Atlantic. It felt like touching history. This was what Damien loved. Not the thrill of driving them, most of the cars were barely street legal and rarely moved, but the act of possessing them. They were his Horcruxes, each one holding a piece of his soul. With Penny on a video call, Genevieve began the grim task of inventory. She opened a fireproof safe in the small office area, the code ironically being their wedding anniversary. Inside were the titles for every vehicle and the deed to the property, all under the name of Sterling Automotive Holdings, LLC. She methodically took high-resolution photos of each document, her name clearly visible as the majority shareholder, and sent them to Penny, who forwarded them through the secure channel to Blackwood's representatives. The response came within the hour. He's no longer skeptical. He's intrigued. He wants to know the price. Here came the most critical part of the plan. Genevieve knew Damien's valuations for each car by heart. He boasted about them endlessly. The total insured value of the collection and the property was just over $350 million. A traditional broker would list it for that, perhaps a little more, and expect a lengthy negotiation. Genevieve had a different strategy. "Tell him the price is non-negotiable," she instructed Penny over the phone. $250 million. For everything. The land, the building, every car, every tool, every spare part, as is where is. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Jen, that's $100 million below market value," Penny hissed. "You're leaving a fortune on the table." "No, I'm not." Genevieve countered, her voice firm. "I'm creating a motive. A price this low isn't a negotiation. It's an opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime deal that a man like Blackwood, a man who lives for the art of the deal, cannot resist. It's low enough to ensure he moves fast before anyone else can get a whiff of it. We're not selling a collection, Penny. We're selling a legend, and we're selling it with an expiration date." She was right. The price was an act of psychological warfare. It was a fire sale price that signaled urgency and desperation, but in this context, it also signaled an unparalleled opportunity. It would force Blackwood's hand. He would know instinctively that a deal like this would never come again, and that it wouldn't be available for long. He had to act now before Damien Sterling got wind of it, and the deal vanished forever. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in precision and speed. Blackwood's legal team, a pack of sharks from a top New York firm, descended. They were met by Penny, who was more than their equal. Documents were exchanged via encrypted servers. The due diligence, which would normally take months, was compressed into a frantic, sleepless 2-day period. Genevieve remained at the sanctuary, a ghost in the machine, providing whatever was needed: serial numbers, maintenance records, additional photos. She found the detailed logbooks Damien kept for each car, filled with his meticulous, slanted handwriting. Reading them felt like a final, intimate violation. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Blackwood would wire the full $250 million to an escrow account controlled by Penny's firm. Upon confirmation of the wire, Genevieve, using her authority as majority shareholder of Sterling Automotive Holdings, would sign a single master transfer document. The moment she signed ownership of the entire LLC, and thus all its assets would transfer to a holding company controlled by Blackwood. It was clean, brutally efficient, and according to a terrified but exhilarated Penny, completely ironclad. On the final evening, Genevieve sat in the small, leather-appointed lounge area of the sanctuary, a glass of 30-year-old scotch from Damien's private bar in her hand. Her phone buzzed. It was a photo from Damien. Another one. This time it was of a ridiculously large diamond bracelet on Katerina's wrist, her hand artfully placed on his bare chest. The text read, "Thinking of you. Picked up something for you at the jeweler's today. Hope you like it." The condescension, the utter blissful ignorance of the man was breathtaking. He was buying her a trinket, a guilt offering, while she was methodically gutting his entire world. She typed a reply, her fingers steady. "How thoughtful. Can't wait to see it. Have a safe flight home." She hit send, took a long sip of the smoky scotch, and looked out at the rows of silent, perfect machines. They were magnificent. They were monuments to art, engineering, and history. And tomorrow, they would belong to someone else. The architect of ruin was about to sign off on her masterpiece. The day of the sale dawned with an almost holy light over the Arizona desert. The sky was a pale, cloudless canvas, and the air was still and cool. Genevieve had slept for 3 hours on the leather sofa in the sanctuary's lounge, a restless, dream-filled sleep. She woke up feeling not tired, but vibrating with a strange, high-frequency energy. This was the day. At precisely 9:00 a.m., a black Maybach, silent as a shark, glided up the long private drive and came to a stop before the building's imposing facade. The rear door opened, and a man emerged. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his late 70s, with a shock of thick white hair and piercing blue eyes set in a deeply tanned, aristocratic face. He wore a simple, beautifully cut linen suit and moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who had never in his life been forced to hurry. It was Silas Blackwood. He had come alone. Genevieve met him at the door. They stood in silence for a moment, the old money titan and the spurned wife, two unlikely allies, in an act of spectacular corporate espionage. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone, "I must confess I have been involved in many unusual transactions in my life. This one is by a considerable margin the most intriguing." "Mr. Blackwood," Genevieve replied, her voice even, "I'm a firm believer that life's most valuable assets should be appreciated by those who can truly see their worth. Please come in." She led him into the main gallery. As Blackwood's eyes adjusted to the curated light, he let out a soft, almost inaudible whistle. He walked slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture that of a general surveying a conquered territory. He didn't rush from car to car like a giddy enthusiast. He paused at each one, observing it from different angles, his sharp eyes missing nothing: the perfect shut lines of the Jaguar's doors, the faint patina on the Bugatti's leather seats, the flawless paint on the Ferrari. He stopped in front of the McLaren F1 LM. The papaya orange, he murmured more to himself than to her. "I was the underbidder on this at Pebble Beach in '08. Damien outbid me by $1 million. He was insufferable about it for a year." He turned to look at her, a glint of something amusement respect in his eyes. "He has exquisite taste. His only failing is that he believes it can be bought." They spent nearly an hour walking through the collection. He spoke little, but his comments were insightful, revealing a depth of knowledge that dwarfed Damien's memorized auction catalogue recitations. He was not just a collector, he was a historian, a custodian. He understood these machines as living things. In a strange way, Genevieve felt a sense of relief. The cars were going to a good home. They were passing from a possessor to a connoisseur. Finally, they settled in the office. Penny appeared on a large screen via a secure video link, her face a grimly professional mask. Across from her, on a split screen, were 3 of Blackwood's lawyers. The air crackled with tension. "Mr. Blackwood," Penny began, "we have received confirmation from the escrow agent. The sum of $250 million has been received and verified." Blackwood gave a slight nod. "My legal team has reviewed the final transfer agreement. We are satisfied." Penny looked at Genevieve through the screen. "Jen, it's time." A legal courier who had been waiting in a car outside brought in a single, thick document, printed on heavy bond paper. The master transfer of ownership agreement. It was the only physical signature required. Everything else had been handled digitally. The document lay on the polished mahogany desk between Genevieve and Blackwood. She picked up the pen. It felt impossibly heavy in her hand. This was the point of no return. For a fleeting second, she saw Damien's face in her mind, not the smug man on the yacht, but the young, hopeful man who had bought that first Shelby GT500, his eyes shining with pride. A wave of doubt washed over her. Was this justice, or was it just a grand, destructive act of vengeance? Then, as if on cue, her phone lying face down on the desk buzzed. She glanced at the screen. It was an alert from a gossip site. She followed a headline pushed to her phone: "Tech billionaire Damien Sterling puts on a show with model Katarina Thorne in St. Bart's." Below it was a picture of them kissing, clearly taken by a paparazzo. The world was already watching. Katarina was getting exactly what she wanted: public recognition as Damien's partner. The world was crowning her the new Mrs. Sterling before the old one had even been discarded. The doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, clarifying certainty. She was not destroying something beautiful. She was cauterizing a wound. She uncapped the pen. The scratch of the nib on the paper was the only sound in the room. She signed Genevieve Dubois Sterling, with a flourish, her hand perfectly steady. Then she pushed the document across the desk to Blackwood. He signed his own name, without flourish, a simple declarative scrawl. It was done. Penny's voice came through the speaker, crisp and final. The signed agreement has been scanned and transmitted. The transfer is legally executed as of 10:17 a.m. Arizona time. The funds will be released from escrow to the account of your choosing, Mrs. Sterling. Congratulations, Mr. Blackwood. You are now the sole owner of Sterling Automotive Holdings, LLC. Blackwood stood up and extended his hand to Genevieve. His handshake was firm, dry. Mrs. Sterling, he said, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. It has been a distinct pleasure doing business with you. I will have my security team here within the hour to take possession of the property. I trust you have everything you need. I do, she said. She had only one small overnight bag. Everything else, the detritus of a 14-year marriage, remained in the Greenwich house. He could have it. And what will you do now? He asked, a hint of genuine curiosity in his voice. Genevieve looked around the silent, magnificent room at the monuments of her husband's ego that were no longer his. The name is Dubois, she said, and I am just getting started. She walked out of the sanctuary for the last time, not looking back. She stepped into the brilliant Arizona sunshine, a light she no longer hated, and got into the waiting car that would take her to the airport. She was $250 million richer, and for the first time in over a decade, she was free. Damien's plane, the Gulfstream G650, was scheduled to land in Connecticut in less than 24 hours. He was flying home to a life that no longer existed. Damien Sterling felt on top of the world, literally and figuratively. From 40,000 feet, the manicured green squares of the eastern seaboard looked like a board game he had already won. The flight from St. Bart's had been smooth. The champagne was Dom Perignon, and the lingering scent of Katerina's perfume was a pleasant, illicit memory. The trip had been a spectacular success. His dalliance with Katerina had been a thrilling diversion, a reminder of his own virility and power. He felt recharged, ready to conquer the market with his new AI venture. He'd even handled the Genevieve situation, he thought, with his usual efficiency. The photos which he knew Katerina had accidentally allowed a paparazzo to take would create a stir, but it was manageable. It would lay the groundwork for the inevitable separation. He would be seen as a man moving on, not a cheater. And the bracelet he'd bought for Genevieve, a gaudy 7-figure diamond monstrosity that wasn't her style at all, was the perfect opening move for the divorce negotiations. It was a clear signal. I am prepared to be generous, so do not fight me. He'd texted her from the plane, a carefully worded message about being excited to be home to talk. Her reply had been brief, but pleasant. I'm looking forward to it too. I'm at the house. All was proceeding according to his plan. The car service dropped him at the grand entrance of the Greenwich estate, just as dusk was settling. The house was lit warm and inviting. He felt a pang of something. Not guilt exactly. More like nostalgia for the orderly, beautiful world Genevieve had built for him, a world he was about to dismantle. He walked in, calling her name. Jen, I'm home. She appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress he'd never seen before. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore a shade of red lipstick that was bolder than her usual muted tones. She looked formidable. Damien, she said, her voice cool and even. Welcome home. Did you have a good trip? It was very productive, he said, setting his briefcase down. He pulled the velvet jeweler's box from his pocket. "I brought you something." He started up the stairs toward her, holding it out like an offering. She didn't move to take it. She just watched him, her expression unreadable. "I think we need to talk first," she said. He stopped a few steps below her, annoyed at the disruption to his script. "All right. Look, Jen, I know you've probably seen some things in the papers." "Oh, I saw them long before the papers did," she interrupted. "Katerina was kind enough to send me a private preview. So thoughtful of her." The air went cold. So she knew, all of it. He'd underestimated the girl's audacity. Still, he could manage this. "Genevieve, I am sorry you had to find out that way," he began, shifting into his placating corporate negotiation voice. "Our marriage, we both know it's been strained for some time. I think it's best for both of us if we move forward separately. I am prepared to be incredibly fair to ensure you are comfortable for the rest of your life." "Comfortable," she repeated the word, sounding like an obscenity. She descended the last few steps, so they were face to face. For the first time, he saw the fire in her eyes. This was not the placid, accommodating woman he had left a week ago. "Your version of fair, Damien, has always been transactional," she said. "You offer money as a substitute for respect. But you see, I've come to realize my own net worth, and I've decided to liquidate some assets." He frowned, confused. "What are you talking about? Your portfolio." "The art, no?" she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Your assets." A cold dread, unfamiliar and deeply unsettling, began to creep up his spine. "What did you do, Genevieve? I was just following your own business philosophy," she said, walking past him into the living room. "Cut your losses, divest from underperforming assets, and pivot to a more promising venture." She picked up a tablet from the coffee table. "I started with an asset that was very dear to you, one that you valued above all others, but that was, legally speaking, under my majority control." She turned the tablet screen toward him. It was a press release from a major financial newswire. The headline read, "Industrialist Silas Blackwood acquires legendary Sterling collection in shocking private sale. Entire turnkey facility and 24 Mark automobiles sold for undisclosed sum." Damien stared at the headline. The words didn't compute. It was like reading a sentence in a language he didn't understand. The Sterling collection. Silas Blackwood. Sold. It was impossible. A joke. A fabrication. "What is this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. That Genevieve said, her voice ringing with newfound strength, is a press release that went live 1 hour ago. "Penny, my lawyer." Well, our former lawyer thought it would be best to control the narrative. He snatched the tablet from her, his hands shaking as he scrolled through the article. It quoted a spokesperson for Blackwood, confirming the acquisition of 100% of the shares of Sterling Automotive Holdings LLC, his company, his cars, the 1962 GTO, the XKSS, the McLaren, his Shelby, all of it, gone, sold to the one man on earth he despised. The blood drained from his face. "You can't," he stammered. "You can't do that. It's illegal. Those are my cars. That's my property." "Actually," Genevieve said, calmly, taking a sip from a glass of water, "they were the property of an LLC in which I held a 51% controlling stake, a structure you yourself created, darling, to protect them. You were so worried about an enemy getting them from the outside, you never realized you'd already let the enemy in." The full catastrophic reality of it hit him like a physical blow. He stumbled back, leaning against the doorframe for support. The arrogance, the planning, the sheer, beautiful, terrible audacity of it. She hadn't just left him. She had disemboweled him. She had taken his soul and sold it to his nemesis. Why, he choked out the word barely audible. Genevieve finally let her mask of calm drop, and he saw the raw, incandescent fury beneath. Why, she repeated, her voice rising. "You sent me a picture of your 20-something mistress from my honeymoon spot with a message mocking me, and you ask me why you spent 14 years turning our marriage into a business merger, and you made me the silent, decorative partner. You poured every ounce of your passion into a garage full of metal, while I starved for a single drop of it. You don't get to ask why. You don't have that right." He stared at her, seeing her for the first time in a decade. He saw the brilliant, fierce woman he had first fallen in love with, the woman he had systematically ignored and suppressed until she had become a stranger. And now that stranger had ruined him. Not financially, $250 million was a staggering sum, but it wouldn't bankrupt him, but in a way that was infinitely worse. She had stripped him of his legacy. She had taken his identity. His shock curdled into pure, unadulterated rage. "You will regret this," he snarled, his voice a low growl. "I will destroy you. I will bury you in so much litigation, you'll never see the light of day again." Genevieve laughed. It was a startling, liberating sound. "No, you won't," she said. "Because Penny has already reviewed every document you've ever signed. The sale is ironclad, and the money is already in an offshore account that your army of lawyers can't touch. This house is in your name. You can have it. You can have the art, the furniture, the sad, empty life you've built. I don't want any of it." She walked to the front door, picking up a small suitcase he hadn't noticed before. "Oh, and Damien," she said, turning back to him, her eyes shining with a victorious light. "That bracelet, you should give it to Katerina. I'm sure it's just her style." She opened the door and walked out into the night, leaving him alone in the echoing silence of the house, the ruins of his perfect world crashing down around him. The aftermath was a symphony of humiliation for Damien Sterling. The story exploded. It was too juicy, too perfect a narrative for the media to resist the tech titan cuckolded and outsmarted by his elegant, unassuming wife. The sale to Silas Blackwood added a layer of Shakespearean drama to the tale. Financial news outlets covered the brilliant, ruthless efficiency of the transaction. Gossip columns delighted in the salacious details of the affair with Katerina Thorne. Tech blogs wrote think pieces on the hubris of Silicon Valley billionaires. Overnight, Damien went from being a feared visionary to a punchline. He did exactly what he had threatened. He unleashed his legal team a phalanx of the most expensive and aggressive lawyers money could buy. They descended upon Penny Vance's small boutique firm like a swarm of locusts, filing lawsuits, injunctions, and motions. They accused Genevieve of fraud, theft, and corporate malfeasance. They tried to freeze the funds. It was all for nothing. Penny, anticipating the onslaught, had built a fortress. The LLC's operating agreement was the stone, and Damien's own signature was the mortar. Every motion his lawyers filed was countered with a simple, elegant presentation of the facts. Genevieve had acted entirely within her legal rights as the majority shareholder. A Delaware judge threw out the case for an injunction within a week, calling it frivolous and chiding Damien's lawyers for wasting the court's time. The money wired from the escrow account in New York to a private bank in Switzerland and then to a trust in the Cook Islands was so far beyond his reach, it might as well have been on the moon. Each legal defeat was another public flogging. Silas Blackwood, meanwhile, played his part to perfection. He gave a single, devastatingly understated interview to a prestigious automotive journal. When asked about his new acquisition, he simply said, "The Sterling collection was a remarkable assembly of vehicles. However, a collection is only as worthy as its custodian. I am pleased to give these important pieces of history a home where they will be understood, not merely owned." The quote was everywhere within hours, a subtle crushing indictment of Damien's entire ethos. Damien's rage, finding no purchase on the steel walls of the law, turned on the only available target, Katerina Thorne. He summoned her to his office. She arrived expecting a declaration of love, a promise of a future together, now that the wife was out of the way. Instead, she walked into an inferno. He blamed her for everything. Her recklessness, her vulgar need for attention, her idiotic text message. He painted her as the architect of his downfall. "You and your cheap little power plays," he roared, his voice echoing in the minimalist office. "You thought you were winning a prize. You were a match, and you just lit fire to a billion-dollar forest." Katerina, stunned and terrified, tried to defend herself, but it was useless. He was not looking for an explanation. He was looking for a sacrifice. He cut her off from his accounts, had her escorted from the building by security, and instructed his PR team to leak stories, portraying her as a manipulative gold digger who had trapped an unsuspecting billionaire. Her 15 minutes of fame were over. Within a month, she was off the A-list party circuit and back to auditioning for protein powder commercials. While Damien was mired in the toxic sludge of his own making, Genevieve was moving forward with breathtaking speed. She had no interest in a life of idle luxury on a private island. The money wasn't a prize, it was ammunition. She relocated to San Francisco, the heart of Damien's own industry, and with Penny's legal guidance, she began to build something new. She established the Dubois Foundation. Its mission was simple and revolutionary: to fund and mentor female-led tech startups. It was a direct ideological assault on the misogynistic boys' club culture that Damien and his contemporaries thrived in. She used her deep insider knowledge of that world, knowledge she had absorbed over 14 years of silent observation at dinner parties and industry events, to identify brilliant women who were being overlooked and underestimated by the venture capital establishment. The Dubois Foundation wasn't just about writing checks. Genevieve created a mentorship program, bringing in female CEOs, engineers, and venture capitalists to guide the new generation. She used her art and history background to teach the art of storytelling and presentation, helping founders craft compelling narratives for their companies. She was creating an ecosystem, a network of support designed to break the very system that had created men like Damien. Her first major investment was in a small, innovative cybersecurity firm founded by a woman named Dr. Aris Thorne. The technology was groundbreaking, a potential threat to one of the subsidiary companies in Damien's portfolio. The message was unmistakable. She wasn't just competing with him. She was actively working to dismantle his empire piece by piece using his own money. The media narrative began to shift. Genevieve was no longer just the scorned wife who got revenge. She was a savvy investor, a philanthropist with a vision, a new power player in the tech world. She gave one interview a sit-down with a respected female journalist. She never mentioned Damien by name. She spoke about opportunity, about overlooked talent, and about the importance of building a more equitable future. When asked about her past life, she simply smiled and said, "I was the curator of a private collection for many years. I learned a great deal about assessing value. I've simply moved on to a collection with far more potential for growth, human potential." The fallout had settled. Damien was left with his hollow house, his diminished reputation, and the bitter, indigestible knowledge that he had been the author of his own humiliation. He had lost his collection, his wife, and the aura of invincibility that had been his most prized possession. Genevieve, on the other hand, had lost a husband, but had found herself. She had taken the ashes of her old life, and from them built a foundation for a new one, a legacy that would be entirely her own. 1 year later, Genevieve Dubois stood on the stage of a packed San Francisco auditorium. The light was warm on her face, the energy from the crowd, a palpable positive force. It was the closing night of the first annual Dubois Foundation Tech Summit, an event that had drawn female entrepreneurs from around the world. The hesitant woman who once haunted a Greenwich mansion was gone, replaced by a leader who had found her voice by shattering the silence. Her foundation had in a single year become a disruptive force for good funding over a dozen innovative startups. After her speech, a young journalist asked, "Looking back, do you have any regrets?" Genevieve smiled, a gesture of profound, hard-won peace. "Regret is a luxury," she said, her voice calm and measured. "The past was a lesson in valuation. It taught me to recognize when an asset is depreciating and to have the courage to divest. I took the capital from a portfolio of static, beautiful objects and reinvested it into a portfolio of dynamic, brilliant people. I believe my return on investment will be infinitely greater." Miles away, Damian Sterling sat alone in the cavernous living room of his Greenwich home. He was still a billionaire on paper, but the aura of invincibility that had been his most prized possession was gone. His reputation was permanently scarred, his name now a cautionary tale of hubris told in boardrooms and at country clubs. He was a king in an empty castle, his rage a constant companion. Late at night, he would torture himself by searching for news of his old cars. He'd see them celebrated as prized jewels of the Blackwood collection, each photo a fresh twist of the knife. His rival, Silas Blackwood, was praised as a true connoisseur, enjoying the machines in a way Damian never had. The final bitterest irony arrived by mistake, a philanthropy journal addressed to Genevieve. On the cover was a glowing feature on the Dubois Foundation. He read the article, his hands trembling, as he saw pictures of Genevieve surrounded by adoring, brilliant women. He learned that one of her funded companies was now a direct competitor to his own. In that moment, he understood the devastating truth. She hadn't just left him. She had erased him. The Sterling name was now a footnote in the story of her rise. She had redefined the legacy, building her own empire from the ashes of his. He was left rattling around a silent house, a man who possessed everything a person could want, yet had absolutely nothing at all. Genevieve Sterling's story is a chilling reminder that in the gleaming world of the ultra-rich, the most valuable assets are never the ones with a price tag. It's a tale of how arrogance can blind even the most brilliant minds, and how a woman pushed to the edge can become the most formidable force of nature. She didn't just get even. She rewrote the entire game, turning her pain into power and her husband's treasures into the foundation of her own empire. What would you have done in her shoes? Could you orchestrate such a calculated, devastating act of justice? If you were captivated by Genevieve's journey from a silent partner to a titan of industry, make sure to hit that like button to let us know you want more stories like this. Share this video with someone who loves a story of epic revenge, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We uncover the most dramatic real-life stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let us know in the comments below, was this an act of vengeance or the ultimate act of self-liberation